All right, shalom, shalom to the nation of Israel, shalom. All right, this is your brother Kazakia out of Great Millstone, New Orleans, coming at you with another lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shah, right? But prior to getting started, we want to give all infinite honor and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakakadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles at Great Millstone, who rule and teach well. Peace, blessings, and salutations be to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, all right? And Salakia, real quick, I'm gonna put this on Do Not Disturb. All right, the title of today's lesson, is going to be The Illusion of Righteousness, okay? All right, that's the title of today's lesson, is The Illusion of Righteousness, all right? And right now, there's a lot of basically, heresies, going out, throughout planet Earth right now, different people coming up on different social media platforms, whether it be, Twitter, TikTok, Rumble, YouTube, okay? These people are having so-called, prophetic revelations and, dreams, visions, which we know what the scriptures say about dreams and visions, all right? And I want to get this real quick just to start us off in the spirit. This is Matthew 7 and verse 15. It says, beware of false prophets. All right. It says, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Okay. So, it basically told us to be what? Beware, man. Beware of people that's going to bring in, a doctrine that's different from our doctrine. Okay, or a so-called false prophet, and basically being be aware. The word goes back into basically keeping a watchful eye, man. Okay, and basically goes into proceeding with caution, right? You watching this person with caution, man, because you're basically hearing the things they say, right? And it's different, it's contrary to the doctrine that you have. Okay, and it also says, which come to you in sheep's clothing. Okay, and which is a parabolic way of saying what? What is that saying, man? It basically telling you that they're peaceable people, man. Okay, they're docile people. Okay, they come in that that's how people come that deal basically treacherously, man, with the people. All right, they come, so-called, warm-hearted. Okay, they come with peace. They come with love, right? They come with unity, right? But the inward thought of that person is basically to do what? To overthrow you, man. Get you out of your doctrine, remove you from off the spirit, right? Through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai, move you from that place to theirs, man. So basically, having you to fall, so to speak. Okay, that's the the thought of these so-called false prophets, man. And like I said, we have on YouTube, on the different platforms, there are many people coming out, ever since the truth, ever since the truth was sprung forth, right, through the elders and apostles at Great Millstone on down, the people's coming out with what? All kinds of different doctrines, man. Okay, that are contrary to the true truth. Okay, and we're seeing that it's prevalent, all throughout, all throughout Earth, man. Mainly here, in Babylon the Great. You know what I'm saying? Because the people's mindset is geared to be against Yahweh Shema Shai. It's really geared to be against the Lord, man. Against the prophets, and really against the truth, right? I'm going to get another precept real quick. This is Romans 16 and verse 17. It says, verse 17, it says, now I beseech you, brethren, it says, mark them, which I believe the Greek word there is skopeo, right? You know what I'm saying? Which basically, you know, just means to watch, man. Like you said, you're proceeding with caution. You're watching people, you know, with caution, man. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not just supposed to, you know, just because somebody says, you know, that they follow the elders, or, you know, they're in the truth too. You know what I'm saying? You still, you know, got to prove that person, man. That person has to be tried and tested, man, in the spirit, man. And then after a certain amount of time, right, you know, a reproof, you know, rebukes, corrections, right, and you see change within that person, you know, if need be, right, which more than likely, you know, if you're outside the body, right, the elders and apostles, you know, started, you know, at Great Millstone, okay, the different bishops, okay, if you're outside the body, you know, when you're coming in, you know, you're going to have a plethora of things that's wrong with you, right? Okay, there's all kinds of things that's going to have to change within you, okay, in order, you know, to fit the body, right? You can't just come in being you, okay? But, you know, the point is, hey, look, man, watch out for these people, man. You know, they on the run, you know, as the world say, you know, they on the loose, okay? You know, that they're everywhere, man. You know, because we're close to the end. You know, we're close to the end of Esau's rulership. So these spirits are gonna be amped up, man. Okay, you know, the spirit, you know, of falsehood, right? The spirit of false doctrines, of heresies, man, is gonna be amped up. Okay, because we're ending this man's kingdom. You know, now we know on the opposite end of the spectrum, you know, this the spirit of truth is going to be amped up too as well, man. You know, and the Lord is going to let it, you know, the world know, you know, who his men are. Okay, he's going to let the world know who it is that, you know, he's dealing with. Okay, because the spirits of the men will be completely different from the spirits of the people that's on the world, man. But watch these men, man. Okay, I'm going to continue on. It says, now I beseech you, brethren, mark them that cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine which ye have learned, and avoid them. You know, and yeah, man, basically, you know, mark the man, which means, you know, basically watch this guy, man. You know, this guy that's causing divisions. And I'm gonna get that you know, in the word division, it basically says, you know, sedition, okay? You know, which basically, you know, the word sedition goes back into what? It goes back into rebellion, man. Somebody who's, you know, rebelling against the Lord, man. Whether they doing it, you know, willingly or unwillingly, you know. Because some people know about the truth and they try to do everything they can, right, to, you know, bring the truth down. Which the scriptures tell you, man. What does the scripture say? Let's get this real quick. This is 2 Corinthians 13 and verse 8. It says, for we can do nothing against the truth before the truth. So there's really nothing you can do, man. Okay? You're really just, you know, basically waiting to be destroyed. Okay? If you're trying to go up against Yahweh B'Shem El Shai, you're trying to go up against the truth. Okay? You know, what did they say in the world? Resistance is futile, man. Okay? I'm gonna read that again. It says, now I beseech you, brethren, mark them, watch these guys that cause divisions, right, which goes into sedition or rebellion, of offenses contrary, right, which the word contrary, you know, basically just means opposite, man. So anything outside this truth, right, that was given to you, you know, starting with the elders and apostles first, right? If somebody come with another doctrine, that would be contrary, right? It would be opposite, okay? And it says to the doctrine, right, which means, you know, basically means instruction. And it says from which ye have learned, and avoid them, right? You got to avoid these people, man. You know what I'm saying? Like I said earlier, you got to have a watchful eye. You know, you're proceeding, you know, with caution. You know, you're basically being circumspect, right? You're looking all around you, you know, for these people that's coming, you know, like that ravening wolf. Okay. All right, let me go ahead and get another precept. Let's get this here. It's a good one. This is 2 Peter 2 and verse 1. It says, but there were false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you. Right? So we know, you know, coming into the truth, right? Basically, you know, don't anything change, man. You know, the Lord doesn't change. You know, the things that happened back then, okay, are basically, you know, the same things happening in today's time. Okay. It's a rinse and repeat. You know, the cycles are still the same, okay? And it says, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, right? Which means they're trying to sneak in, you know, sedition. They said, hey, look, this, you know, let's not worship this way. Let's not do this way. Let's do it another way. You know, let's call upon this, you know, this false deity, right? This false god, you know, this idol. Okay, and we're gonna start worshiping like this. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so you know, that's just basically, you know, giving an example, man. And they come up with a set of instructions, right? A doctrine behind it, you know, to basically proceed forward so that the people can fall, right? Because it looks good, or it may sound good, or it may be easier to do or pleasing to the flesh. Okay. You know, but don't go for the trickery, man. You know, it says, even denying the Lord that brought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction, right? Because, you know, when the Lord returns, man, you know, all the false prophets, right? All the different people that came up against the Lord, right? The mockers, the scoffers, okay? The scorners, right? All those people are going to be destroyed, man. Okay? They're going to be burned up, right? If they even make it that far. Okay? But, you know, ultimately, they're going to be burned up when the Lord brings the ICBM missiles, man. Okay? When the Lord brings, you know, hell on earth, right? And he comes through with his chariots, you know, with fire, okay? You know, those people are going to be basically made into stubble, okay? And the scriptures tell you that. Let me get that real quick. Let's see here. I'm going to start at verse 8. This is 2 Esdras 16 and verse 8. It says, the mighty Lord sendeth the plagues, and who is he that can drive them away, right? And these plagues, right, is informed, right, in the representation of the nuclear missiles, man, that's going to come and destroy Babylon the Great, you know, which is aka America. Okay, there's this whole land will be a complete barren desert land, right? That's from Yahweh Shema Shah himself. Okay, and it says, a fire shall go forth from his wrath, and who is he that may quench it? Verse 10, it says, he shall cast lightnings, and who shall not fear? He shall thunder, and who shall not be afraid? Verse 11, it says, the Lord shall threaten, and who shall not be utterly beaten to powder at his presence, man. Right, man. And this goes for what? This is going to, you know, that basically, you know, what we call, you know, that Sarah Connor treatment, man. You know, when she was in a movie, right, the nuclear missile comes, right, hits, detonates, right, she's hanging on to the gate, and all her flesh just, you know, flies off her to it's nothing but basically, you know, skeleton, man, you know, left. But these people are going to be reduced to ash, right? They're going to be turned into powder, Okay, you know, that's the judgment for the people, you know, that basically want to be false prophets, man. Okay, they're coming and peaceable and very docile, and they sound good to the spirit, and it feels good to the spirit, right? But ultimately, what, man? They're looking to overthrow you. They're looking to get you or knock you off the path, man. Okay, they have what the title of today's lesson is: the illusion of righteousness, man. Okay, and you know, basically, you know, the illusion is basically like, you know, the act of this deception. Okay, right? You know, they're basically putting on a show for you. You know what I'm saying? But you know, behind the scenes, they're doing something totally different, man. Okay, and like I said, you know, earlier, these people are absolutely everywhere. Okay, so but there's only one, you know, group in particular that has the truth, man, that's bringing forth the light of Yahweh Shema Shai, and that's the elders and apostles, man, you know, at GMS. Okay, and other like-minded brothers, you know, that's pushing, you know, the word, okay, the same doctrine, you know, throughout the planet. Okay, all right, let's get another precept. Actually, I'm gonna continue on in that Second Peter's, the Second Peter's 2:2, and it says, "And many shall follow their pernicious ways." Okay, let me go and do this. Yeah, Salakia. It says, verse 2, and it says, "And many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of." And I'll read the same verse in the GNT. It says, "Even so, many will follow their immoral ways." Right? And because of what they do, others will speak evil of the way of truth. Right? You know, and I believe, you know, it's in John, the 16th chapter, it says that people would literally, be trying to kill the people of the Lord, okay, and thinking and doing it and thinking they'll be doing God a service, man. You know, that's the type of so-called instruction that will be on the planet Earth. Hey, look, these guys you know, are basically enemies of the state, right? They're basically, you know, so-called, I don't know what they'll use, maybe treasonous or something, you know, basically just against Babylon the Great, which is AKA America. You know, they're gonna basically say, hey, look, you know, we're gonna, you know, round these guys up, we're gonna capture them, we'll put a bounty out for them, you know, and you know, we basically need to stop them from doing, you know, what they're doing, man. Okay, now we're gonna go to the next verse, and it says, verse 3, and it says, "And through covetousness," right, because it's greed, man. You know, a lot of the false prophets, right, that put on that act of illusion, right, is out for greed, man. You know, here it is. The pastor, you know, so-called pastor, the so-called deacon at the church, tell you, you know, that the law is done away with, okay? But at the same time, he'll also tell you that you got to pay tithes, which is directly associated with the law, man. You know, so what is it, man? Okay? You know, at the end of the day, they're covetous. Okay, they're greedy for gain, man. You know, they want, you know, they want money, right? Some want whatever, money. You know, maybe some you know, had to deal with maybe fame or something like that. You know, different, you know, possessions within the world, whether they want a damn, you know, Learjet or something, you know, a big ass house, you know. Okay, but the point is, the scriptures say, "And through covetousness shall they with feigned words, okay, make merchandise of you." Okay, And you know, that word feigned just goes into what, man? It just goes into false, man. Okay, these people aren't telling the truth, man. Right? They, you know, do what the world say. They talk a good game. You know, but inwardly, man, they're out to completely deceive you, man. Take all your money and go on about your business. Go about their business. You know, because what do, man? You look at you know, they're pretty much, you know, a church, you know, in every hood, you know, damn near on every corner, you know, but the place is what? It's still desolate, right? The people are basically still, they're dry, right? They're lacking the spirit, man. You know, the community is absolutely garbage, you know? So how is this, you know, the place of the Lord, man? Okay? Nah, you people are false prophets. That's what it is, man. Okay? And it says, shall they with feigned words, right? Basically, you know, being insincere, right? False. It says, words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now of a long time lingereth not, and their damnation slumbereth not. Okay? And I'm going to read the same verse in the GNT, and it says, in their greed, right? It says, these false teachers will make a profit out of telling you made up stories. You see that? I'm going to read it again. It says, in their greed, these false teachers will make a profit out of you, a profit out of telling you made up stories for a long time. Now their judge has been ready, right? And it says, and their destroyer has been wide awake, right? So the Lord is coming with, you know, basically swift, fast destruction, man, to these people that's putting on a cloak of righteousness, right? But really their intent is absolutely malicious, man. Is, you know, it's going to lead, you know, the people to death, man, right? They're already being led to a spiritual death, and they're going to receive an actual physical death from Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai, man. At least they repent. Okay? But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. You know, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai. The title of today's lesson is, you know, the illusion of righteousness, man. Beware of these false prophets, man. Beware of the false teachers. Okay? You know, the spirit of the Lord is amped up, being amplified on both sides, okay? You know, you don't want to get caught in a snare, caught in a trap, okay? You know, continue on doing, you know, what you're doing as far as following the elders and apostles at Great Millstone on down, you know, and keeping true to the doctrine of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai, okay? But like I said, that's all I have through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai. You know, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying, first and foremost, to the hopeful elect. But prior to getting out of here, we want to give all infinite honor and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahushua, Ba'ashim, Rakakadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles at Great Millstone who rule and teach well. Peace, blessings, and salutations be to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, all right? Kwam Yasha'Allah, Abba Ball, Shalom.